Welcome, everyone. This is our program information night on the OHSU-PSU Lactation Program and all about Pathway 2. And I want to let you know we're going to be recording this session. So if you have to leave or you didn't catch something, this will be sent to you later, as well as posted on our YouTube or our channel or our website. In addition, we'd love to hear your questions, so feel free to put it in the chat as you go. But we're also going to be open to staying around after to address folks' specific questions. If you just want to meet somebody or talk a little bit longer, we'll be here in the room till about 8:45. So we're so glad that you could be with us today. Well, how about just for who's in the room, if you can find the reaction and raise your hand if you are from Oregon. Okay. Nice. And how about now, you can put your hand down, put a thumbs up if this is the very first few months, weeks of exploring the career of lactation, or have you already been in it, thinking about it, dedicated reading for months/years by now? So if this is the first few months you've been thinking about it, you get to thumbs up. If you've been in here a long time, you can put the heart sticker. All right, so we have a lot of breastfeeding fans here, just feeding fans who've been thinking about this a long time. Well, you're in the right place, because what we're about to do is talk about taking the next step. And my name's Michelle Bressler, and I'm the program director at OHSU-PSU. And I want to introduce my other faculty, and Dixie Wetzel. She's going to be taking us through the practicalities of who can apply, when, what requirements they need, the financial details. Rachel Martinez will also be popping on, and she's our clinical instructor. So she will be talking about placements and possibilities and what the practicalities are. Carrie DiStefano is also one of our lactation education instructors, and she's going to chime in with some tips about the interview process. So, and then we also are blessed with both current students and graduates to share parts of their experience. So you're going to hear from lots of us tonight. So without further ado, unless somebody wants to say something, I'm going to share my screen so we can start. Okay, Dixie, I'm gonna, so here we are. This is our thought. And like I said, we'll send out the link later. And I just have a little pathway graphic before we get into the details, that these are kind of the steps that you'll be going through on your way to becoming an IBCLC. And just know it's not a one-stop shop. It takes a while. So we want you to be prepared for that, and that there are many kind of steps, but hopefully that will all be building your preparation and your readiness for launching the career of lactation. All right, Dixie, I'm going to let you take the wheel.
Okay. So yeah, so who is eligible to apply for the PSU Pathway 2 program? Our program is structured in a way that allows any student to take a certain, some courses in our program before they actually apply for our Pathway to Practicum. So before a student can apply for our Pathway to Practicum, you need to complete our lactation education courses, right? So, and even stepping back further before that, you have to be a health professional, or you have to have completed your health sciences education. Then the second step is you need to complete those lactation education courses. And then we would always encourage students to obtain any amount of either lactation experience, breastfeeding support experience, work or volunteer experience in that area, or simply obtaining more breastfeeding education or lactation education through free webinars, those kinds of things. We do allow students to participate in our Pathway to program. If they are degree seeking, all of our coursework can count toward a bachelor's degree. However, if you already have a bachelor's degree and you're not interested in that, you can then participate as a certificate student instead. And so it is important, if you are a degree seeking student, that you do have kind of backup plans for the required internship for the degree, just simply because sometimes there's limited entry into the practicum program. Okay, and again, be sure and chat your questions, as we go along here, but we'll make sure we address them before the end of the webinar. So this is just a timeline then for the application process. So once folks have met those requirements we just talked about, the application is we have a timeline each year. So the students who have met the requirements and have completed their lactation education courses are then ready to apply. The application is online and available now. And we'll put the link, unless somebody wants to go and get the link to the application and post it in the chat, that would be great. So the applications are open now, and they have to be turned in by May the 20th by 5 p.m. All of the application is completed. You complete the application and send it in, electronically. So there's no coming and bringing paperwork of any kind, and you submit your references and the transcripts and all those kinds of things. And there's instructions within the application about that. Then what will happen in early June is we'll be inviting folks who qualify then for interviews, and those interviews, at this point, we're kind of deciding about whether interviews for those folks who are here locally will be in person, or whether we're just going to be doing all virtual interviews, but we will have the option of virtual interviews no matter what for folks who need those. Once folks have gone through that interview process, then what happens is we evaluate their application and their interview, and then the folks that we accept into the program are notified by the middle of July. So yeah, so now in the chat, you see the application link to the practicum application for those of you who want to take a look at that. And even if you're not going to apply this year, it's a good idea to look at the application just so you get an idea of the kinds of questions that we ask on the application. It's pretty similar each year. So once folks are accepted in mid-July, there's a variety of clinical screenings that they must complete, and those have to be done typically by toward the end of August. And these include that, that all the different kinds of things: background check, drug screen, vaccination verification, and current CPR. And then there's going to be some preparation for your clinical experience through a distance learning course. That's a 2-credit course to really prepare people for that clinical experience. And sorry, there we go.
Sorry about that.
And then your practicum starts at the beginning of the fall term, which is usually the end of September. Okay, now we're ready for the next one, I think. Okay, so so as people were coming into the webinar tonight, there were questions about how much does our program cost. Now, this is going to give you costs for based upon resident tuition. And remember, we're a tuition-based program, so the majority of the costs are tuition-based. And there are varieties of ways to qualify to pay resident tuition. So it is important not to assume that, oh, I live in California, so I don't qualify for resident tuition. That's not always the case. So it's really important to find out more from us, because tuition is based upon the type of student you are, as well as where you're located. So get more information from us. So these rates that we've listed here are based on resident tuition rates, although we always have students from out of state in our program every year. So on the lactation ed courses, that's 10 credits that you would take during the first 3 terms or quarters of the program. And then the clinical experience is 15 credits spread over kind of that summer through spring of the next year. And there are additional costs beyond the tuition that include those screenings that we were just talking about, as well as uniforms, ID, that kind of thing. And that's between $200 and $300. So we have a total cost, if we put that all together, of, close to $7,100 for the whole program. And that's based upon our current tuition rates. And of course, as you know, tuition rates do increase oftentimes from year to year. So, okay, yeah. So let's see. One of the questions in the chat is, could you go over the deadlines for applying for the lactation specific education courses that are needed before the practicum? So sure. And I think, basically that kind of depends upon what type of student you are, Micaiah. So I'm going to write that down to respond once I'm not presenting anymore, and I'll respond in the chat, and then we can follow up with more questions, right? So the deadlines for that lactation ed courses, I will do that. Okay, so why don't we go on to the next slide? Okay, so this just goes over those requirements again that you have to do before you come into any kind of clinical experience. And it is important to know that immunizations are required. Immunizations and titers are required. There's no allowing one person or another not to have those, because you're going to be working in a variety of clinical settings, and we want to be sure that people are able to get the wonderful clinical experiences we have to offer. So that is a requirement, including COVID vaccinations. So yeah, so all of these kinds of things are part of that. That's all right. Yeah, that's fine. It's also important to remember, when we talk to you about the cost of our program, to remember there are lots of different ways that we can help you find support to pay for our program. So we have a lactation scholarship fund that usually gives out a couple of lactation scholarships each year. There are also a variety of scholarships through the school, the OHSU-PSU School of Public Health. There's even a childcare subsidy for folks who qualify for that. And certainly our courses, if you're taking them as a degree seeking student and you meet the qualifications for financial aid, you can certainly use financial aid to pay for the courses as well. Jezreel is asking, is there a list of vaccines required? Yes, there is, because we follow the Oregon Health Association, or Health Professional Student requirement. And I will put that link into the chat when I am finished speaking. So the list of vaccinations and the other requirements. Okay, so yeah, so there's a wide variety of ways. We also have some great programs depending upon where you live. For students here in Oregon that are degree seeking, we have some wonderful transfers finish free. That's a great program for students to use. So there's a wide variety of ways we can help you look for support, as well as, let's see, maybe go to the next slide. Is the next slide more scholarships? Yeah. So there are also scholarships that are available for the exam. There are scholarships that are available, that are can be used more generally for different training programs. So one of the things we're happy to do is talk with you and make sure that you know about all the different resources there are for ways that you can get support to pay for our program. So, okay, why don't we move on to the next one? And this is where I finish up. So I'll put these other things in there while I hand it off to Rachel.
Good evening, everyone. Again, my name is Rachel, and I am the clinical instructor. So I am the faculty that helps guide you through your practicum experience. So I think before we answer the question, where will I obtain my clinical experience? I think we'll take a step back to let's just envision you are participating in your lactation education courses. And at some point, Dixie and Carrie will say, have we thought about where we're going to do clinical experience? And so even while you're taking your classes, you're going to be encouraged to start to think about, for instance, those of you who may not live in the Portland metro area, is there a hospital near you that would be willing, to talk with our program if they don't already have a contract with us, because we contract with the clinical institutions that accept our students. If they don't already have a contract with us, is this an institution we can approach and ask if they'd be, their family birth center will be taking on a student. Some students have spoken to other community resources, other private lactation consultants about, taking on a student for the practicum term. So if you're not in the Portland metro area, Michelle does have a list of some of the hospitals and other organizations that we do have contracts with already, but we could also, have you start doing some of that groundwork before you even get into the practicum experience, to start to see in your area near you some potentials, recognizing some potential sites that may be willing to take a student and work with our program. So again, these can be sites where it is a hospital setting. It might be a standalone, maybe birth and postpartum center. It could, if you have a milk bank in your area, sometimes, we're able to have students do some work in the local milk bank. Working, closely with the WIC organization in your state can also be another option. But you'll already start having those conversations even before your lactation education is done, so that, we'll be able to be in contact with, any of these places that will take a student. And the reason we start talking about it that early is that the process in developing a contract with a site takes quite a while. So it literally takes several months for those contracts to be drawn up and to be reviewed and to be agreed upon. So that's one of the reasons why it's real important when you start talking about that during your lactation education courses, that we really start to identify early a potential site in your area. If you're here in the Portland metro area, we already have contracts, as I was saying, with lots of the local hospitals and other organizations. So we're usually able to work directly with those pretty readily, but we still have to continue to renew contracts, and so that's why we like to start that process while you're still taking your education courses. Okay. So this is a map to kind of just give you an idea of where some of our hospitals are contracted. If we're able to open this map up a little bit, so a lot of those clusters that you'd see, lots of strings of hospital systems here, in the West, particularly in the Pacific Northwest, that we have contracts with. But you can see there too, we're even as far as Minnesota right now, and we're hoping to continue to expand. So wherever you're joining us from, not to worry, we're going to work with you and we're going to help you identify that site. And we're do everything that we can to get you in a spot in your area. So when this used to be just one or two in the Portland metro area, we're really excited to see how our program has been growing and being able to expand and reach the rest of you around the country. Okay, next slide. As Dixie was saying, there's many who come to the program who may not have had clinical experience at all, particularly in a hospital setting where many students do their clinical practicum. And that's why we developed this shorter class taken at the end of the summer, usually the end of August. For some it might be a review, but for others it might be a great introduction to the clinical site, to what the expectations are, and give you kind of a feel of what what to expect when you do, meet with your preceptor on your clinical site. So we'll be, reviewing things that may or may not be familiar to you, kinds of things like terminology, charting, appropriate, like things like infection control, those kinds of things. And then also look at some lactation specific tools that you'll be, encountering. And we'll, do a little practice even before you get onto your clinical site of kind of what to expect. And then we start to, hit the ground running in the fall. So you will be introduced to your preceptor even before the term begins. Usually this is done by email. And we really encourage students to kind of take the lead in kind of fostering that early communication with your preceptor. You'll be working with your preceptor to develop what your schedule will be. You'll be learning things about where do I even go in the hospital? You'll have to get a security badge. Where do I go to get that? There's a whole bunch of those little things to get you started that you'll really need to communicate with your preceptor about. And that usually takes, the first week of your clinicals to kind of get those things all put in order. We do anticipate students to, at least work at their clinical site, if they can, at least 2 days a week for an 8-hour shift. So anywhere between 12 and 20 hours is pretty average. And if you stay on that pace, then you're on a fantastic pace to continue to complete your hours in a manageable amount of time. We do have 2 full terms, the fall and the winter term, and then a shorter one in the spring. And we want to make sure that you're having an opportunity to get those 300 hours of clinical hours of experience in that time frame. So that's why we do kind of have the expectation that you'll, be able to be on your clinical site at least 2 8-hour shifts a week. The days and the shifts will again depend on the clinical site and when their preceptor is available. So you might need to, work a weekend here or there, depending on the preceptor schedule. So I would anticipate that you're going to have some weekends that you might have to be on site. You will be, factoring in transportation time because you'll be going to and from the site on your own. And then we will be meeting once a week in the evening. Kind of to come together as the cohort, kind of debrief your experiences, go over any questions or experiences that came up that you just want to get some more information about. In addition to that, you'll be writing case studies for the families that you'll be serving when you're on your clinical site. So those are other things that we'll be talking about, are those case studies, and some various other projects that you'll be doing. And then we do meet once a term in person on campus. For those who may not be in the Portland metro area, it's totally okay if they join us via Zoom. But it's been really exciting to see that even and you'll meet one of our students tonight, which she even comes in for the class, or she flies in from her hometown, and has joined us for these in-person weekends, which can be, really, really exciting and kind of a lot of fun. We spend a fair amount of time doing a lot of hands-on skills that you may or may not have experienced at your clinical site. And just again, making sure that you have the tools that you need to be able to experience that in your clinical setting. All right, and then I guess I'll hand it over to Carrie then.
Right. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the application and interview process. So we did put the link to the application in the chat box for those of you that might want to take a look and kind of get familiar with that. The interview process, it is a panel.
Sorry.
It's okay. It's a panel style interview. So it is a combination of faculty, possibly a member of our advisory board, potential employers. So it's not just a one-on-one interview. So it is a panel style interview. And we would really want you to treat it just as you would as if you were interviewing for a job. We want to hear about you, tell us your past experiences, tell us what your strengths are, what traits, what qualities you have that you feel are relevant to lactation, what draws you to the profession, And also don't discount any past experience that maybe doesn't seem relevant to lactation, because there's a lot of skills that lactation consultants really need to possess that you will find are very transferable from other jobs. Like, for example, I know just off the top of my head, people that have transitioned to being IBCLCs from being lawyers, being a teacher, being an event planner, being in the military. So there's a lot of different people with different career backgrounds that kind of get drawn to lactation, and all of that previous work experience, there's going to be some parallel to some of the experience and qualities that you would need to be a good lactation consultant. So like counseling or communication skills, interpersonal skills. If you have a healthcare background, that's certainly a plus, but it's definitely not required, as we've kind of touched on a little bit here. Just some people have never really set foot in a hospital working as an employee. So I know my first experience personally working in a hospital was doing my clinical hours for lactation. It was all brand new to me. So tell us all about kind of, like I said, what you've done in the past and how that experience can help translate to being a lactation consultant. We want you to, again, present yourself in a professional manner, whether the interviews are done in person or via Zoom. And Michelle, did you have a poll that you wanted to launch about if people were doing an interview?
I think,
or did we not set it up?
It didn't quite work the way.
Okay.
But if people they wouldn't mind outing themselves and raise their hand about their preference.
Yeah, or just if you want to put in the chat box, like if you have a preference, if you were going to go through the interview process, what would you prefer? Would you prefer an in-person interview, or would you prefer a Zoom interview? So I'll just let you guys maybe put that in the chat, and I'll just keep going. And there are the school offers interview skills and practice through the Career Center. So that link is in the slides, which you will receive. Just reading some of the chat. Looks like some people said in person. And if you're distance, we would not expect you to fly in for the interview. So if you are calling in from the East Coast, we would definitely accommodate Zoom interviews. We're just kind of getting a sense of what people are interested in. Okay. All right. So important things we really want you to know. As we already talked about, vaccinations or proof of immunity are required for clinical experience. The applications are, must be complete and are received by the due date to be considered for the program. And there are situations where people may be placed on a wait list to be considered. And that can happen if there is not a placement where you are, like a clinical placement where you are locally. So that can happen. And so we do generally have an active wait list. So if something comes open prior to the summer distance learning course that we talked about, then you may be able to be pulled off the wait list and placed into a site. And then if you're a degree seeking student, it's good to have an alternate plan for an internship if the practicum is not the right fit or an option for you for that particular year. And just to also mention, the way we do the scores is you get a score both for the application and the interview process, and then those are added together, and then that helps kind of to determine your placement and where you kind of fall in line with the other applicants.
Thanks, Carrie.
Okay.
All right. I wanted to call out that we recognize that our world and our breastfeeding world is not as diverse as we would like it to be. And we are looking actively to change that. So the candidates might be placed with Black Parenting Initiative and with Healthy Birth Initiative. Black Parenting, it's BPI. Okay. But anyway, we want to make sure to know that there are culturally specific organizations in the Portland area that we can place you with, as well as if you're elsewhere hoping to find those kind of situations in other parts of the country. At this point, I would love to let one of our graduates talk a little bit about how representation matters. And Veronica Lopez is one of our graduates. Are you available to speak for a few minutes about your experience?
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
Can everyone hear me okay?
Yes.
Well, good
Go
evening,
ahead.
everyone. Good evening, everyone. My name is Veronica Lopez Erickson, and yes, I'm a recent graduate of the PSU Lactation course program. I'm happy to be here with everybody. I am a public health nurse with Multnomah County Health Department. I've been a nurse for 16 years, so a long time, and here I've always done some lactation education, and then wanted to pursue my IBCLC as well as part of my practice, and took the course, and I'm also a recipient of the scholarship program, award program, and I work for culturally specific home visiting programs. So we're nurses and community health workers out in the community. And pre-pandemic, we were in homes working with moms who were expecting babies and their newborns, and continue to work with them until the child turned 2 years old, until they reached their second birthday. And of course, the pandemic has changed all that. So we're moving to telehealth and doing video chats with moms. And in the course of that, continuing to try to support their lactation goals and their chest and breastfeeding goals for their little ones as well. And here more specifically, I've been part of two culturally specific programs at the county. One is Empezando con Salud, our culturally specific home visiting program for our Spanish-speaking community in East County. And I am also have been a part of the HBI, Healthy Birth Initiatives, our culturally specific program for our African-American communities in the county as well. And my colleagues are all nurses of color, all African-American nurses. I had to earn my spot on this amazing team and continue to serve African-American moms and babies and families in our community. And it's been a wonderful experience, a wonderful program for moms who needed some encouragement and some support around the benefits of breastfeeding. There are certain communities that certainly have experienced discrimination and racism in trying to reach their breastfeeding goals, and or lack of access to lactation support. And so we really try to do a lot of outreach to our communities of color, and assign a person, a home visitor, a nurse, or a community health worker who represents their own cultural identity as well. And along with our partnerships with other community agencies, such as BPI, Black Parent Initiative, and Latino Network, also AFO, it's our African Holistic Health Organization for our African immigrants and refugee communities. And we know that that's really important to address the racial health disparities in our nation, in our county, in our city, and really supporting moms to come together, at least virtually for now, and hopefully one day we'll be back in person again to support them through support groups and being in person and sharing stories and receiving some community advice and facilitated by lactation counselors as well, who also identify as people of color. And that really brings the community together for that type of support. And in addition, I think pursuing an IBCLC opens doors for other things. I myself, like I said, having been a nurse for many years and was able to sit for my exam and pass the exam. Then I got an opportunity to move into be promoted as a manager. And so now I'm one of the managers co-managing our WIC program, which is Women's, Infant, and Children in the breastfeeding and lactation services that we're trying to, again, enhance our culturally specific programs in this huge organization that is statewide and receives state funding. And so how do we continue to raise the voices of communities of color in this organization that is primarily on a clinical service or clinical type model. And that's what we're working on, is how to integrate cultural specific programming for supporting our diverse communities and our diverse families. So it's a great opportunity. You never know where it's going to lead you, and my journey has certainly been a surprising one. It's been a long time facilitator of lactation education, and then to have the certification has led to a wonderful opportunity in being promoted into a manager position. And so I hope that inspires you all to continue to pursue your goals. So thank you for letting me speak with you tonight.
Thanks, Veronica, and congratulations on the new position. Very cool.
Thank you.
All right. We are going to move to letting some of our students talk. This is this year's cohort, and you can see we were kind of we've been masked and now we've been unmasked. So I'd like to, and I could do this alphabetically and call on you one by one to just tell a little bit about the practicum experience, what folks need to consider. And I mean that like really specifically, like who's cooking dinner in your house, you know, how did you make those juggles? And then I want Rebecca, who's our student who lives in California, to talk a little bit to the people in the audience who are wondering, well, how will I be included if I'm far away? And I want to give you a chance to talk about that. So Jill, going by the alphabet, would you mind going first?
Sure. So hi, I'm Jill. I am doing the practicum this year, so the second year with PSU. I was a nurse in the UK for a while, but I'm not a licensed nurse here. So I kind of could get the prereqs done by being a nurse, but I'm still kind of, I won't be working as a nurse IBCLC here. So that's how I kind of am going through this program. And so practically, so the application process, like has already been mentioned, it's quite a lot of work, and you need to put a lot of effort into the application. It is like a job interview, so you do really need to sell yourself. And like was already said, all that experience you might think is not relevant probably is relevant in a lot of ways. And just bringing it, and they really want to know what you're like as a person and what you're going to bring, sort of, as well as experience, just your passion too. And in terms of kind of practical things, in terms of the kind of work-life balance, it varies, it changes. For me, it's changed the first kind of semester to this semester. It changes in terms of the days of week I've worked and how flexible placements are, and that can change place to place. So some people kind of have it set up so you have your whole schedule for the 10 weeks, so you know exactly what days you work in, and that can be really useful. And other places are kind of like, well, whatever suits you will fit you in. So that really changes. And it's up to you to, I think most places are pretty comfortable if you say you want those days set, or if you want to just choose week to week. Most places are pretty flexible with that. And it does impact home, I guess, in some ways. We have to do there's some elements of written work and the class meetings that are really important. So that does need to be factored in. I've got 2 young boys at home, so bedtime's always I struggle as it is. So it's something, we have to work out. I have to work out with my husband and who's doing what. So you do have to consider those things. 2 days a week I've typically stuck to, sometimes 3. Yeah, I think was that answering all your questions, Michelle? Okay.
Great, Jill, thank you. Rebecca, can you go next?
Sure, I'd be happy to.
Great.
So I'm actually in California. I'd say I agree with what Jill said about the application process. I did definitely I sort of like try to download it early, take a look at it, and even things like getting the letters of reference, sort of thinking about those people that you might want to asking them early to get that those all lined up. And as Carrie mentioned about the Career Center options to support that, I actually took advantage of that and did some virtual meetings. I think it was 1 or 2 with somebody from the Career Center who we didn't do a full mock interview, but she gave me some questions to think about to sort of help you think, how do those life experiences that you might have or from other jobs, how could they apply to questions that they might ask? So that was good to sit down and think about that to help in preparing for the interview. So let's see, for work-life balance or practicum life balance, definitely coordinating meals. I actually ended up starting, so it's sort of talking about the process about getting the site set up. My site was actually not set up when I was going to start the fall term, so I started a little bit late. So I ended up doing some weeks where I did do 3 days, and my site was a little bit further away driving wise. So I chose, my preceptors actually work 12-hour shifts. So I chose to have longer days a lot of the days to sort of maximize the driving time. So I definitely would coordinate, even trying to think about like meals that were easy for my husband to throw together right when he got home from work with the kids, or something that's already in the slow cooker, little things like that. And a lot of coordination. I also have 2 small children, one's kindergarten, the other one's in pre-K, 2 days a week. So coordinating childcare and rides to and from preschool, all those little details that have to be worked out. So to make that happen, we had some support from family. Thankfully, my husband's family is a couple hours away. So, and then also some other, to be honest, supportive parents of some of my daughter's friends in school, with even just picking her up from school and dropping her at home with the babysitter for my other child. Little things like that, that you sort of have to, so I think sometimes stretch and find all those people that can maybe help support in small ways to make things easier. Let's see. And then for the distance piece, I have chosen to fly in for all the in-person weekends. I really enjoy getting to be with my fellow students in person, and I enjoy that in-person learning. Thankfully, we were at points in the pandemic where I felt fairly safe to travel too, so that was helpful timing wise. But I think if you had done it over Zoom, it would still be good learning if you couldn't travel in. So I did choose to come in for those. And let's see what else. Yeah, I think I think what Rachel mentioned about if you are from out of this the Oregon area, starting to find sites early is helpful, and trying to make some contacts. I will say something that I found helpful, or well, I have found it helpful. I wish I had started earlier, as I joined the local breastfeeding coalition here to just sort of make some contacts and get to know people in the community. And I wish I'd sort of started, they do all their meetings over Zoom right now, so it's easy to join in. Of course, if your schedule allows that, but that way you can start to make some contacts and have some maybe face recognition with people in the community when you go to then approach them maybe about having their site as a clinical site. So that can be a good resource if you're out of the local area and trying to find sites that you can go to. So.
Thanks, Rebecca. I think that's a great tip, because I think for both you and our other California student earlier this year, the connections made on the coalition really helped pave the way to the actual experience. So it is a good thing, and it'll pay off, you know, it will pay off in the longer term as well.
Mhm.
Hey, Zoe, are you able to come on and talk a little bit about your experience in the student, as a student and in the practicum?
Sure am. Yeah, hey there, I'm Zoe. I'm a current practicum student. My experience has been really positive. I would say that I am a little bit unusual in that I don't have children, and I'm a single person, which means that I am, in a lot of ways, I enter this with like a lot of privilege, and that I don't have to think about how this impacts my family. I would also say, I saw in the chat, oh, it looks like Dixie's answering that, but I also entered this with a lot of privilege in that I was able to save and prepare to work less during this time. I would really encourage folks who are thinking like, oh my goodness, I'll just keep my regular job and add this into my schedule, that this kind of work is really big, even if it doesn't feel big hours wise. It's really like heart-centered and impassioned, and it takes up space in your life. I would encourage people to plan to take more time than they need to both be physically present and emotionally present, and to process after. I would really say that you need a good support network of friends, family, listening ears. I am a more sensitive person, and this kind of work requires a lot of processing for me. I think a lot of us who enter this world feel the same way. Let's see, what else would I say? Yeah, I think that's it. I don't know.
Do you want to share a highlight of something that's happened on a day, on a clinical day?
Oh boy. Oh, well, I'll just share that today I'm in kind of a unique location right now, in that I'm at, folks who know Oregon, I'm at the Hood River Hospital, which is a really small hospital, really quaint, really adorable. And something that happens there that doesn't happen in a lot of places is that we often get to see people right after they give birth. So today I got to see someone right after they gave birth and help them with that first latch, which was really special.
Yeah, there's nothing like those babies. You can tell they're still kind of juicy from the womb.
Yeah, it's really,
That's
really
amazing.
sweet.
Thank you, Zoe. All right, we're gonna move forward to talk to our graduates. And this is just a silly slide from, we had to have a Zoom graduation last year. We're gonna have a in-person one next year, or this year rather. So I've invited some of our graduates to come and talk about what happens after you finish the program. So most people will be finishing up in May and putting all their materials together to apply for the exam. And then the exam itself happens in the fall. So you have a few months to get ready. And then you take the exam in the fall, and then the results usually come about 3 months later. So so there's a little bit of downtime. And so I'd love to have folks kind of address, what did they do to study? What they do with their downtime? And then even more importantly, how was the job search, and what have you done so far? And I think if we're going by the alphabetical, I think Anna is here. So if she wouldn't mind taking the mic.
Yeah. Hi. Hello, everybody. It's been it feels like a really long time since I was in the program. So this is kind of fun to kind of think back a little bit. I told Michelle I'd do my best to recall because I feel like a lot has happened since that. It was 2019 December when I got my certification, when I got it in the mail. So or found out, I think, more accurately. So
Okay, but to be fair,
yeah,
a lot of big stuff has happened in the world in those exact same
exactly. I think
years.
totally. Yeah. Yep. So let's see, after, before then, so going back, finishing practicum at the end of that previous spring, throughout the summer, it felt like a very long time until the exam in October. So I tried to do my best to think about my studying in terms of, you know, a little bit each week so that I didn't let go of, you know, some of those skills and some of that education that I had just received that was so amazing. So I did sign up for exam prep that I paid for because it felt good. It had specific like tests, example tests that I could take, and I could take them over and over again, and then kind of look at where I did poorly and study those certain areas. And I really think that helped me as far as thinking about you know, the style of test that it was going to be. That felt helpful to me. In my practicum, I was a little bit different than some of our practicum in that I live out here in the Columbia Gorge area. And so I was able to connect a little bit with one of my practicum was out here at our small hospital. And so that lactation consultant, even in the spring, she was going to be retaking her exam in the fall as well. So she had collected some extra resources, flashcards, and was willing to share them with me. So, and we chatted about the exam and what it was like, and that felt really helpful. And having her to be thinking about what that exam was going to be. And so possibly in your practicum sites, asking those IBCLCs, you know, what their experiences was, I think will be very helpful. I also joined some of the Facebook groups that are doing exam prep, and there's always people asking some specific questions. And one was specific to the exam prep test organization. And so they would speak to specific questions. And I just found that helpful to, you know, oh, good question. I hadn't thought about that. I'm going to go back and look at what, research that question a little bit more. So I think I felt that was helpful. And then also in the meantime, I hadn't been working very much. It was a lot to do. I felt like it was my job as I was going to school, and that's what I would spend whenever I would be on as a mom in the day, and then my husband would come home and I would be studying in the evening. That was my work time. But then after that, school was done. We needed another income in our family. So I ended up getting a job. I'm a baker. I was a baker previously. And so I got a job at a bakery and started to work a little bit so that pressure for myself was a little relieved. And then also I started to network in my community. I was friends with a local family practice doctor. So I asked her if I could interview her about possible jobs. So thinking about what I was going to do. I am a non-RN lactation consultant. And so I wasn't certain where I was going to be able to find work. And so yeah, I found that was helpful. She helped me kind of think outside the box a little bit more about work in our area, and thinking about some of our local clinics and whether or not they'd have the capacity to hire a non-RN kind of and also she knew other pediatricians and things, people just to get to know and let them know, hey, I'm looking for work out here. And then, yeah, just taking a deep breath and taking that exam, it felt like a really big step. And so I planned for a little celebration just the day afterwards with my husband. We went out to dinner because that was a big step to have gone through the program, taken the exam, and I felt decently about it. I don't know, it was good. And then passing, yeah. And then I think career steps after that, as far as a non-RN and the pandemic having just started, I decided to, I hadn't had success in reaching out to health departments and clinics. And so I was feeling a little like, oh, how am I going to get a job right now? So I reached out to Doris for a little bit of support in thinking about starting a private practice. And it was very helpful just to think about starting small and then finding some resources to start a small private practice. And I reached out to one other local IBCLC who had recently started a practice, and that led to thinking about starting a nonprofit during the pandemic for lactation, postpartum doula services, which has been somewhat successful. It's successful in that I got to start working and helping and seeing clients and learning about starting a nonprofit, which is a whole nother thing. But that led me to networking with and learning the language of community partners and meeting doctors and talking about our nonprofit services and thinking about barriers. Our local breastfeeding coalition did a lactation assessment for our community. And so like having those discussions, and that led me to meeting my local Clickitat County Health Department nurse manager, who they wanted help starting their breastfeeding peer counseling program for WIC. And so all of those little steps led me to my job at the local public health department. And I'm able to do in-home lactation services and work for WIC and some other programs there. So was that too much?
No, except people are probably wondering about the flashcards now, like, I get started.
I don't know where she got them. I could
No.
find out. They weren't, I didn't make them. I think they were came in a package that she had.
Totally.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you, Anna. That's inspiring.
Yeah.
So Leah, you are next on my alphabetical list to tell your story about how you found the after PSU part of your journey.
Perfect. Anna, that was so great to hear from you. We were in class together and
I know.
I followed along as much as I could on what you were doing. So that's great. So good to hear.
Nice to see you guys.
Yeah. So my name's Leah and I completed the program with Anna, and I can't believe that was about 3 years ago. It also feels like an eternity. And so I guess when I finished the program, I am an RN. And so I guess when I finished the program, my goal was just to study and prep for the exam. So I'm in my little like study area, and I found my books. So the Breastfeeding Atlas, it's huge. And I use this Lactation Consultant exam review book, which is, if you like doing questions and just over and over, it's helpful. Some of the questions are a little weird, but it was helpful. And then the Lactation Education Resources Program online I did, and that was also super helpful. And so sat for the exam like Anna did in I guess it was October of 2019. And during that time as well, I was gonna say, another super helpful thing that I found during that summer was to meet up with some folks from our class. So I had 2 other people that I was studying with probably about once a week, just to talk through things, like when questions didn't make sense or answers, we couldn't figure things out. Talking through some of the details was super helpful for me as a learner. And so I definitely would recommend just being with others during that time. And then as far as jobs go, I'm trying to think, I'm like, what was I doing? I think I was applying for as much as I could, like, even though I didn't have my certificate as a nurse, there were jobs available. And they said, if you've done the 300 hours of practicum, you can apply. And so I applied for a job through Providence and then started working as a resource nurse at their outpatient clinics at St. Vincent's and at usually, well, they float me around, but St. Vincent's, Prof Portland, sometimes down at Milwaukee or Willamette Falls. And so I got that job before I had my exam results. And I think I started, like I took the exam and started that job all in the same like couple of week period. So that was a little bit intense trying to onboard at a new job and take the test. And no pressure, like we just hired you. And now if you don't pass, like what happens then? I don't know what would have happened. So, but that worked out. And then, so I was just looking for whatever lactation related jobs. There was also a job at OHSU doing education in lactation, and I applied for that and did that. And that was like 4 hours a week. I did that for about 1.5 years. And then that program kind of changed during the pandemic. And so I stopped working there about 1 year ago. But that was great. Loved doing education, super passionate about prenatal education. And yeah, I mean, I think you just put yourself out there. And I love what Zoe was saying earlier about being like big-hearted worker. You know, it's like the program, working in the field, it's wonderful, it's rewarding, and it's also, you need the space to process. I'm the same as Zoe was saying. So I am fortunate in that I'm not working full time. I don't know if I could actually do this work full time because it's very intense. So I'm working probably on average a couple days a week for Providence right now. So that's my story.
Great, Leah. It's nice to see your face. The last time I saw you, you had the mask and the shield on. So
oh yes. Not fun.
Yes, exactly. Well, good to hear your story. We also have one more graduate, Robin Nunez, who has another story to tell. Robin, are you out there?
I'm here.
Hi. Awesome.
Hi. Excuse me. It's so good to see some of these faces. I also was in class with Leah and Anna, so I finished the program back in 2019, which yes, feels like forever ago. And gosh, I kind of have had my hands in a lot of different pots for the last like 5 years since I started down this journey. I felt like from the very beginning, networking as much as I possibly could was the way to go. So I started working at the milk bank or nonprofit milk bank here in Portland in a non-IBCLC position. I worked in our lab for about 1.5 years. And during that time, I prepped for the exam. I also studied the heck out of the Breastfeeding Atlas and made flashcards and did the LER prep tests and formed some study groups with other classmates, all the things. And I have a little bit of a different background. I did birth work leading up to this. So I am a doula and a childbirth educator, and I was doing that work through school, and I had already set up my own practice, offering those services. So after I passed the exam, I added lactation services to my practice. And the pandemic happened. So that, you know, those first couple months were really weird. And it was interesting trying to get a practice up and running during that time. But I think it was for the best because I wasn't busy and I was able to really kind of fine tune and figure out, you know, like what charting platforms I wanted to use and those sort of little details. I continued to work at the milk bank, and in 2020, I moved into a role in the front of the office as the outreach coordinator, also a non-IBCLC role. But I love the work that you know, our nonprofit milk banks do, and it was really exciting to just continue to be in that space. And I've sort of always kind of pieced together work. I worked part-time at the milk bank. I had my practice on the side and got to see clients, you know, as much as I could possibly take on. I had a second baby last year, so that kind of threw a curveball. And I most recently got a job at Legacy Health, which is the only hospital system in Portland area that does hire non-RNs. So I'm actually starting that job next week. I'll be an on-call IBCLC, and yeah, that's sort of how I've done it. And I think every job I took and every connection I made really brought me to where I am now. And so that's kind of my story.
Thank you, Robin. This is great. I think you probably all have gotten a little bit of a picture that it's not just a straight shot, where most of us have to do a little bit of negotiating and waiting and pacing ourselves before we get to the job that we have dreamed about. But there's many rewarding things that happen along the way. So after hearing all this, some of you might be saying, well, is Pathway 2 really for me? And maybe I'd be better suited to do Pathway 1, which is when you're able to get the hours on your job, or Pathway 3 when you sign up with a mentor. And I just want to put a little plug in for why you might still consider doing your lactation education at OHSU-PSU. Those earlier, we've heard people mention about how they got to meet colleagues, and that builds your referral network, so that if I were to have a friend that delivered in White Salmon, Washington, I'd know who to call because Anna's there and we went to school together, that kind of thing. And then for peers to help study for the exam together, because many people like to have a little collegial experience when they're doing their study. So that's just some thoughts for you. And then for the final slide of the presentation, I just want to let you know that we are here for you. You've probably emailed us before at lactation@pdx.edu, but more questions, request an advising appointment. These are all the things that we want to be available to you. Right.